Hey guys, welcome to the stream tonight. Glad you guys could make it for our usual Wednesday stream. Got you 5 stories, so we'll get started on some great tales that you'll hear next week. Looks like my levels are good there. Um, Trying to think if I've got any news. As you can hear, there are peepers in the background again. The turkeys are settling in nicely, and we've got some little chicks that are just waiting to be big enough to go back outside. So you will definitely probably get some peeps and poops in the background there. Let's see who we got. Hey, Osiris. Hey, Leia and Blondie. And Peg's probably lurking in there. And hello to all of my lurkers. And I hope you guys enjoy the stream tonight. Trying to think if we got any news. Nothing really comes to mind. Still working on the edits for that new book, so expect to see that very soon. I'm almost done with the audiobook I'm narrating for They. It's a book about alien abduction, but I figure you guys might join it. As Blondie can attest to, most of my narrations on Audible are pretty good, so it's a chance to listen to your favorite narrator and maybe toss me a few bucks here and there. You know how it is. Hello, Lance. We're glad you could make it too. But after that, I'm starting one called, what is that one called? Hold tight. Morgan and Tess, about a vampire and a zombie. So that should be interesting. But yeah, that's about all we got going on, really. Yeah, it's really about all we got. If I still haven't forgot about the books, I am planning to get those in the mail tomorrow. I got to go back and check my emails and get some addresses. But my plan is to get those in the mail tomorrow so you guys can have your books. I know I've waited a little long for this one, but finally we've got some steady money coming in, so everything isn't going to bills and groceries and stuff. But I'm gonna mail out some books tomorrow. Leia, you're getting a fat stack of books. Blondie, I think you're getting the Dollar General one, and then I've got to send Bev a copy of the Dollar General book. So be a big day for books in the next couple of days. Well, for you guys, it'll be a big day for books for me tomorrow because I'll be shipping them out. That's really about all we got going on. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot to speak of. Yeah, that's really about it. Did I get the wrong one, Blondie? I thought you had bought a Dollar General book, but I could be wrong. Um, we'll we'll get on the same page there. Oh, you probably want a Towsy Homestead then. I think, yeah. Whichever ones you're missing, I'll get you one of those. I thought we had talked about the DG one, but I'll probably end up getting you a Towsy Homestead then. But yeah, so that's what's going on over here. Um, the first Stragview book, that's right. That's going to be my next one coming out. Is I got to get you I got to get you guys another Stragview book. It's ready. I just need to get it up on KDP. Yeah, let's go ahead and do some stories here. Now, this one is going to be our last Black Site story for a little while. We're finishing up chapter 4 at this point. Excuse me. So, that's going to finish up our Black Site books. And then we should be good to go. Probably get some laughing audience stories because we're almost done with that series too, and then we can shut the door on that one and maybe get some new series is coming out. I'd love to do more with the Travel Writer or the Park Ranger. Just a little something extra there, but we'll figure it out. I think there's only like 5 or 6 laughing audience stories left to do until we're done with that series. But yeah, so this one's going to be the last Black Site for a while, and then we'll move into another series and we'll figure something out. Anyway, this one's called The Day Ends, and I hope you guys will like it. It focuses on some different characters so that we can end out chapter 4. Bedtime, kiddos. Everyone to the bunk area for some shut-eye. The kids made their way to their beds as another day in the kindergarten came to an end. Masha cast a glance at Dex as he walked to his bunk. Rebecca quieted her mind for a good night's exploration. Dex and Dunstan nodded to each other as they climbed beneath the sheets, and Gerald just stared at a slowly pulsing string as it stretched across the ground. The lights dimmed as everyone settled in for the night, and slowly the kindergarten quieted. But despite the children's quieting for another night of sleep, elsewhere people were doing anything but settling down. Elsewhere there was still business to be done, and evils to accomplish before the day was out. Cutter looked up from a strenuous workout as the overhead announcements rang out before turning back to his weights. 45, 46, 47, 48. Cutter liked to maintain his physique. When you worked with kids that could explode your brain from the inside, you had to come to terms with that however you could. Cutter liked to do so by pushing his body to its absolute limits and making himself as imposing as possible. He learned a long time ago that just because a kid could crush you into paste with an errant thought or make you cluck like a chicken by invading your brain didn't mean that they would. Most of them were still just kids. They could be intimidated, they could be scared, and they could be charmed by an adult who seemed to be impressed by them. Cutter had put hands on some of them before, and it was amazing how they folded when someone with absolute authority finally stepped in. That's good. 49, 50. He put the bar back in the rack with only a little noise as he sat up and wiped sweat from his brow. Cutter considered this to be his vacation and his retirement after serving 2 tours in Iraq. Cutter had served with guys who had joined the Marines because they wanted their school paid for, or because they wanted action and adventure with none of the getting shot at. And hadn't really appreciated being in an active war zone. They were wannabes, fake warriors, and when the bullets started flying, they suddenly wanted to be anywhere but there. Cutter had a leg up on most of them. Cutter had been in Desert Storm when he was fresh out of boot camp. Hang on a second. Gotta remind Susan to take the lasagna out. All right, where were we? When he was fresh out of boot camp. That does sound like a good time, Leia. It'd be nice to have a lot of different voices for it. and done some things for his country over there that would have maybe been considered distasteful. He had discovered that he liked hurting people when he was younger, and he had taken it into the military with him. If it hadn't been for some hard-nosed general pushing him out after an incident in Kandahar, Cutter would probably still be overseas shooting people for one organization or another. Instead, the black side had decided that he could be of use to them, and he'd been here for the last 20 years doing just that. Cutter was a survivor, but he was getting old, too. He knew he didn't have many more years of this, his usual formidability left in him, and he intended to extend it as far as he could. He moved on to another machine and continued his workout. Cutter knew guys he had gone to high school with who were using walkers and pissing in bags right now. That wasn't going to be him. He'd put a bullet in his head before he let anyone see that kind of weakness in him. 1, 2, 3, 4. The weights went up and down as the cords on his arms bulged and slackened. Cutter could go like this for hours, and after the week he'd had, he just might. Nothing put him to sleep like a bottle of Jack and a good workout, and he intended to push it to the limit tonight. By the time he fell into his rack, he wanted to be good and thoroughly tired. It is a really good series. I can't wait to read it on the channel, honestly. Dr. Hammarskjöld was finishing up a report and rubbing at the bridge of his nose. He still hadn't heard back from the woman that Dunstan claimed was his mother. He was beginning to wonder if he would hear back from her in time. He wanted to help Dunstan, maybe get him some closure, or give him a quiet place to land after all this was over. But he knew that happy endings weren't the norm for these kids. He also knew that Security Chief Ridley was still keeping an eye on him. Every time he passed by one of those camera housings, it felt like eyes boring into him, and it made him flinch just a little bit every time. He didn't know why he was so nervous about being watched. So what if they were watching him? He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't hurting anyone or committing any treason. He was simply doing something he felt was right. He looked at a tab next to the one that he was typing in and clicked over to look at an email that he was drafting. He had drafted about 100 emails like it, but he had never sent one of them. Working for the government had its advantages, and finding his daughter's email account had certainly been one of them. She was an adult. She would want to hear from him. But every time he finished an email and read it over, it always sounded pathetic and weak to his own ears. Why would she want to talk to him? He had abandoned them. He had left them to whatever fate might have in store. He was a failure, at least in their eyes he would be. He couldn't expect anything of them, and the same thing he had always expected. Damn it. Try that again. The same thing they had always expected from him. He hovered his cursor over it to delete the email, and then clicked over to the report instead before it could find its way into the garbage bin, as so many had. Coward, he told himself. Maybe he was a coward, but he didn't know what he would do if she rejected him or didn't want to speak to him at all. People had been rejecting him for most of his life, and every time it was a little harder to see the good in humanity. They hated him because he was short and because he was deformed. They didn't hate him because he was essentially practicing eugenics for the government. They didn't hate him because he was a monster who hurt children for his country. They simply took one look at his outsides and decided they didn't want anything to do with him. It was unfair, but so was life. He pinched the bridge of his nose again and went back to typing. He needed to finish up this report for today's lessons so he could get some sleep and do it all again tomorrow. Perhaps there would be an email from Janice tomorrow. Perhaps he would finally muster up the courage to send an email to his daughter tomorrow, and maybe he would even hear back from her. That was the good thing about tomorrow. You could always delude yourself into thinking it was full of possibilities. Miss Cashmere had nearly been asleep when someone knocked on the door of her small room. She grimaced and checked the time. It was about 10 o'clock, and most people knew that she liked to be asleep by 9:30. She'd brushed her teeth, gotten into her pajamas, and taken her sleep aid. And now she was getting ready to drip up. And now she was getting ready to drift off to sleep. When someone had decided to come and bother her. She thought she knew who it was usually the same person, and she decided it was time to have a talk with them about boundaries. She got up and turned on the nightlight on her bedside table before heading to the door and opening it to find one of the IT's. Ooh. Damn it. And opened it to find one of the IT guys standing there with a cheap bottle of wine and a cheesy grin stretched across his face. His name was Gavin, and she had an on-again, off-again thing with him. He was nice enough, not bad to look at, and a generous lover, but he could be tiresome as well. He reminded her of the Leonard character from The Big Bang Theory. Nice and sweet, but a little too clingy and naive for her taste. He was also young enough to be one of her kids. Jensen was 5 years younger than him, but already seemed more mature. That wasn't a deal breaker for her. He was over 18 and had pursued her, but it was still a little creepy when she stopped to think about it sometimes. "Hey there," he said as the door came open, holding the wine like a game show host, showing off his wares. Cook was getting ready to throw out some wine, but it's perfectly in date, and I see no reason that we shouldn't enjoy it. Would you like to share a glass with me? It's still pretty early." "Sorry, Gavin. I've already taken my sleep aid, and I think I'm going to turn in. I've got a busy day tomorrow, and I've got to keep my head around little Masha, unless I want it to explode." Gavin smiled, but he had a funny look on his face. He looked as if his disappointment was twined with something like anger. Not real anger. Gavin was too much of a wuss for anything hotter than petulance, but he might have at least come all the way to disappointment. He'd clearly thought that going out of his way to get something nice for her would earn him some time in her bed, and now that wasn't happening, and he felt frustrated and petulant, like the child that he was. "Seems like you haven't had any time for me since you started your new class. Maybe you've outgrown me." Miss Cashmere tried not to roll her eyes. She had outgrown him before she met him. Gavin was sweet, but she had a husband at home waiting for her, as well as a couple of kids in high school. It was a private high school, tuition paid for by generous contributions from the black side and the federal government, and both of her children were far more emotionally mature than the man standing in her doorway. The kids sure did wish that Mama could be home more often. So did her husband, for that matter, but a little separation was nice sometimes. It let her truly be herself and maybe find something new and strange before going home to her loving husband. That's good. Let's go. There we go. "This is a little different than teaching blue band, sweetie. This kid could be dangerous if she's not instructed just right. It's like training dogs. You have to keep your wits about you or you're going to get bit. I wouldn't mind a little nibble sometime, Gavin said, trying to be cute, but barely making it to annoying. Maybe another time. I'm already starting to get drowsy. If you catch me this weekend, maybe I'll have some time for you. He was starting to become tiresome, and she wanted him to take a hint and go away. Okay, he said, perking up a little as he realized he might still have a chance. Maybe I'll catch you on Saturday. They're watching a basketball game in the teacher's lounge, so I don't think anybody'll notice if the two of us slip off. She smiled and tried not to let her skin crawl too much at the prospect. Until then, she said, as she leaned forward to kiss him on the cheek before closing and locking her door firmly. She was going to have to break... Try that again. She was going to have to break things off with him soon. Gavin was getting clingy, and he just wasn't emotionally mature enough to have a friends with benefits kind of relationship. He had spoken to her more than once about having a life together outside this place, but she had always reminded him that there was no life for them outside of here. She would return to her family, and he would return to his apartment or wherever he stayed when he wasn't here. They could only really be together here, and despite how many times she had said as much, she didn't think he was ever going to get it. She was asleep about 5 minutes later, her dreams filled with Gavin's clumsy hands and honeyed words as he lay her down for the night. Security Chief Ridley saw the door close and smiled as Gavin slunk off with his wine. On another monitor, he watched Cutter lift weights as if he was going to find genuine power in those weight. Bleh. Tried to ad-lib it there, but it didn't work. Let's try that again. Let's try that again. He watched Cutter as he lifted weights, as if it would give him the special powers that so many of his students possessed. On another screen, he watched a couple of other IT guys as they sat in the cafeteria and drank whiskey from plastic cups. Gavin wandered in, and they offered to share the bottle of wine. Soon he was laughing and passing it around as he drank some of their whiskey and forgot about his failures of a moment before. Not much escaped the notice of Security Chief Ridley. He often spent his evenings sitting behind the screen in his office and keeping an eye on everyone within the facility. He could even see the little doctor as he sat in his quarters and obsessed over a report that he was writing. There weren't a lot of places that they didn't have cameras, and the places they didn't have them were more about decorum than anything. Ridley had a few cameras in some of those places, but nobody but him knew about that. He'd made it a rule not to have them in the children's bathrooms, however. Turkeys, what? My goodness. Peep, 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 peep. Something like that seemed wrong, even to him, and he was a man who regularly tortured children for the good of his nation. Something about watching the little kids as they did their business, however, seemed a step too far. There had to be a line drawn somewhere, or what was to separate him from the animals and the politicians. Ridley was a man who hoarded secrets like a spider hoards flies. He sat in his web and watched the comings and goings of everyone below and gathered up his flies for the time when he might need them. You never knew when someone was going to get the bright idea to try for his job, and Ridley wanted to be able to dangle something juicy and scandalous over them so they would shut up and fall back in line. It was the thing that had ultimately doomed his predecessor, and the secrets were how he had gotten to the center of the web, something he felt was well-deserved. The coffee came up to his mouth as he took a sip, his eyes never leaving the monitors. Security Chief Ridley knew that something was afoot, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it before it threatened everything he had worked for. He was... He wasn't going to lose his web to a bunch of snot-nosed kids or a bunch of greedy adults. When it came down to it, Ridley would rather burn the place down himself and rebuild from the ashes than let them light the fire. If it were all to fall apart, then let it crumble by his hand rather than theirs. There you go. That's your first story of the night. Hey, El DeGusto, glad to see you, man. Oh. Give me just a second. I'm going to turn the fan on in here. It is toasty. There we go. At least a little bit of airflow. Okay. So that is our final chapter of Chapter 4. There will be more Blacksite, but that's the last one for now. We'll pick them up a little bit down the road and see what adventures they get up to later. Okay. Let's see. What do we want next? Hang on while I'm thinking about it. Do we want our... Oh, it says... Every day, thousands of innocent plants are killed by vegetarians. Help end the violence. Eat bacon. My dad got it for me. He thinks it's hilarious. It is pretty funny. Let's see. While I'm thinking about it, let me put that in the old Blacksite file there. Every time, I swear. Just paste it. There we go. Okay, chapter 13. So, do we want a Kashmir story or do we want our Dr. Winter story? Thinking maybe the Kashmir one, but if you guys want to hear the Dr. Winter story first, I certainly won't stand in your way. It's a pretty good one. What do you guys think? Dr. Winter's story? Kashmir story? I'm thinking Kashmir. But, you know, I like to get a little group consensus every now and again. I see one vote for Kashmir. Yeah, I think maybe we'll do the Kashmir. We'll still get the Dr. Winter story. It'll be up next. But let's go ahead and read our Kashmir story. This one involves our two favorite town lovebirds out on a camping trip. But it's Kashmir, so you guys know that something weird's gonna happen. So, let's hear a story about the Woodland Rites. Hey, Michelle, we're glad you could make it. All right. Let me adjust my mic a little bit. Yep, levels are good. All righty. And let's get rolling. You know, you don't have to come with me. They were sitting in the parking lot of the Kashmir Woodland National Park, and Earl had been nice enough to drive her out here. She had brought a backpack of some things that she would need before she turned, but Earl had insisted that he wanted to come with her. He said that he would just camp out in the woods, wait for her to come back, and then the two of them would leave together. She had insisted that it was dangerous and that he didn't have to go. He could just go home and wait for her, and she would be back tomorrow. Earl had said that was silly, and she wouldn't hurt him, and that it would be fine. You don't need to worry, Candace. I'll be all right. I've got my wolf's bane that I'm going to sprinkle around the campsite after you're gone, and I've got a bunch of mothballs that I'm going to put around so that there's no way you'll come back and gobble me up." Candace looked dubious, but she said she would be willing to give it a try. She honestly liked the idea of having someone out in the woods in case something went wrong. There was always a chance that when she was in her wolf form, something. Yeah. Something that happened a couple of times a month, she might climb a tree or fall into a lake or do something else that would result in her having trouble when she regained her human form. She liked going into the woods around Kashmir because there wasn't really anything out there that could hurt her, and there were fewer chances of finding something that you could hurt, like people she liked. She would hunt some deer and run around and get it all out of her system somewhere where no one ever went. The idea that Earl would also be out there made her feel like the chances of something happening were a lot higher, but she was willing to let him try. "Okay, if you're sure. I just don't want you to get hurt or anything." The two of them climbed out of Earl's truck, Earl bringing his own backpack out of the back of the old Ford pickup, and the two of them hiked into the woods so they could begin their 2-day camping trip. Earl would be alone tonight, but Candace had agreed to camp with him for real the next night, so the two of them could experience nature together. That way, it would be like they had taken a little romantic trip instead of her just waking up naked in the woods and then coming home. Earl liked to camp, so it was nice to finally get to do so with his girlfriend. He'd been an avid hiker most of his life, and he was looking forward to spending a night in the woods, something he get yeah, something he didn't get to do very often. The two of them headed deep into Kashmir woods, a place that had been a lot quieter lately. People didn't report seeing strange creatures as often as they used to, and the rate of disappearances in the woods had really gone down a lot. Earl and Candace weren't the only couple that had been talking about heading into the woods to commune with nature, but they were probably the couple that was going the deepest. They found a place just as the sun had really begun to sink, and Candace helped Earl set up his tent and begin laying out the logs for the fire. She showed him how to sprinkle the wolf's bane so that she couldn't come back and eat him, and he put the mothballs around to keep everything else away. Earl had told her time and time again that nothing liked the smell of mothballs. Mothballs? And it was probably almost as good as wolfsbane when it came to repelling things. Earl had a healthy fire going. Can't read tonight. Earl had a healthy fire going by the time Candace started to feel the first tingles of the transformation, and she kissed him on the forehead before running off into the woods so that she wouldn't be able to hurt him when the change finally came over her. Earl watched her disappear into the trees, feeling oddly empty, but also glad that he had done this. He took out some hot dogs and started making dinner, cooking them over the fire as he listened to the sounds of nature unfurl around him. He could hear the bugs and the night birds, the sound of bats and the scamper of possums as they went about their way. Earl leaned back against the log that he'd been using as a chair and looked at the stars, the light pollution this far out of town almost non-existent. He liked to sit in the field near the graveyard sometimes, on clear nights, counting the stars and remembering the constellations he had learned when he was a kid. Earl liked camping because the chances of running into a ghost out here were pretty slim, and it was relaxing in a way that many things often weren't. When he heard the crunch of footsteps coming closer, he shifted a little as if expecting to see the shaggy face of his beloved. The steps were too light, though. He had seen her in her beastly form, and it was much too large to walk that quietly. This was something else, something less monstrous, and as it came closer to his campsite, he saw that it was a person. It was a middle-aged man in jeans and a poncho, a bag. Sorry, guys. A bag slung over his shoulder as he came through the woods as if it were nothing more than a hike. He noticed Earl and waved at him, approaching the fire with a big smile on his face. "Good evening. It's rare to find someone out in the woods like this. Do you mind if I have a seat? I've been walking for such a long time." "Sure," Earl said, a little bit relieved to see it was another person. "Drag up a log. I've got hot dogs if you want one. There's a little tea in the jug, or I can make some coffee if you're looking for something warm." "Thanks very much," the man said. "I might let you talk me into one of those hot dogs, and a glass of tea would be very appreciated. I've been wandering around the woods for quite some time, and I think I might be a little lost. I'm looking for the town of Cashmere. You don't happen to know where it is, do you?" "Well, sure. I've lived there a long time." "Excellent. Maybe you could point me in the right direction. I seem to be lost, and it seems like the town can be a bit troublesome to find." Earl started to point him in the right direction, and then got a funny feeling. People usually knew how to find the town if they were going there, and it was rare to find someone lost out here. Could it be that he wasn't supposed to be there? He had seen the posters about reporting strangers who just wandered into town, and he knew that one of the deputies had been seen at the bus depot talking to new arrivals. It also seemed weird that this guy was just out wandering in a patch of woods that most locals knew to be dangerous. A lot of things didn't make sense, and Earl suddenly wasn't so sure that he wanted to show the man how to get to Cashmere. Tell you what, why don't you set a spell while with me until my fiancé gets back, and then we'll take you into town ourselves." The man smiled wide enough to make Earl afraid he might lose the top of his head, but there wasn't any real substance to it. "Well, I don't want to be any bother." "No bother at all," Earl assured him. "Cashmere is a real neighborly place. I'd consider it an honor if you'd let me help you." The man smiled all the bigger. "Very neighborly indeed. I come from a place like that. A very tight-knit community, where we like to help people, too. I wonder, friend, would you mind if I spoke to you for a minute about something?" "I suppose it couldn't hurt," Earl said, never being able to guess what the subject matter might be, and that it could very well hurt. "You see, I belong to this little organization called the Bright Farm. We keep livestock, we grow crops, and we just do all kinds of things in service to the Bright. Have you ever heard of the Bright, friend?" "I can't say that I have," Earl said, as he tried to keep his voice steady. Earl had heard of a dozen or more strange religions that seemed to float around Cashmere, but none of them had anything to do with this Bright or its people. "Well, that's okay. The Bright teaches us to speak to people wherever we find them. It's a very close-knit group. We like to help each other, and we like to help people who may be lost or looking for something. Is there anything you're looking for, Earl?" Earl shook his head, but felt a little jolt in his stomach when the man said his name. Earl did not remember having introduced himself. "Really? You don't need anything?" Can't say as I do, friend. I have everything I need. Nice place to rest, good friends, the love of a good woman, and a job that makes me feel fulfilled. As far as most people are concerned, I'm I'm the richest man in the world." The man laughed in the face of Earl's less than sure chuckle. "I suppose most people would say that you are. Most people want all kinds of things, Earl, whether it's stability or money or even just companionship. Everybody needs something, Earl, so it's rare to find someone who has everything. Maybe you'd be interested in helping people find that sense of fulfillment that you already enjoy. Would you like that? Would you like to help bring joy to others?" Earl put his hands in his pockets to keep them from shaking. This guy was a little weird, a little creepy, and Earl was suddenly very sure that he did not want to take him back in town. He felt certain that if he did bring him to Kashmir, it would be so he could turn him over to the sheriff, or maybe to the mayor. He certainly didn't want anything to do with him, or whatever it was he was selling. I I think I'll pass, buddy. I have a very good life in Kashmir, and I think that's where I'll probably end out my days. I just realized my fiance might be a little longer than I thought she was going to be. The town is in that direction," he said, pointing in the opposite direction from where the truck was parked. "Why don't you go ahead and head that way, and maybe I'll see you in Kashmir or one of these days." The man didn't move. He just sat right there, smiling at him as he shook his head slowly. "Now, that wasn't particularly friendly. You and I both know that isn't the direction of the town. You're trying to send me off on a wild goose chase, aren't you, Earl?" Earl thought about lying to him, but Earl had never been very good at lying. "If you knew which way the town was, why did you ask me?" "Because the town doesn't want me to find it. It doesn't seem to want any of us to find it. The town is confused. It's been given bad information. We could be of great benefit to the town and its people. We could all be great friends, maybe even family. All you have to do is let us in." "Oh, I think if the town doesn't want you in it, then neither do I," Earl said as he cut him off. "I don't understand what's going on, but I'm pretty sure that we're done talking. I think I'd like you to move on now. I think I'd like you to head off into the woods back the way you came." The man got up, smiling, as he took a step towards Earl. "Oh, I don't think so. I think I'm going to sit here and let you see what the Bright has in store. I think that maybe once you get a look at the Bright, you won't be able to help yourself. You'll serve us, Earl, because it's what you were born to do." The man reached into his pocket and took out a book, opening it as something bright and eye-watering began spilling out from the pages. Earl put a hand up to block his eyes, but it seemed to shine even through his fingers and the skin of his hand. It was assaulting him from all sides, and Earl felt he might start screaming if that light didn't go away very soon. He should have chased the guy off when he came, but Earl had been trying to be friendly, and now it appeared that it was going to cost him. He started crawling away from the fire, crawling towards the darkness that lay just outside his campsite, but the man kept following him, no matter how far he went. As the light pressed down on Earl, he began to hear church music and see things that didn't quite make sense. He saw people like this man gathered together. He heard them worship the Bright, and as that light filled him, Earl began to wonder why he had resisted so hard. He began to ask himself why he didn't give it a try. He didn't understand why he had been so hesitant to speak about the Bright. It truly was beautiful, and he suddenly wanted to know everything about it. When the light was cut off, he looked up in confusion and saw that the man was shaking and convulsing as the book tumbled from his hands and smoldered on the ground. A large furry hand had closed over the man's shoulder, the bones in his chest smushed inward like some kind of accordion. It was Candace. It had to be. And as she pulled the man into the woods, Earl heard the crunching begin. He dragged himself back towards the light, the closest thing to the brightness he could find. Then he pulled himself into a fetal ball as his mind tried to push out the influence of the dastardly Bright. He tried with all his might, but as he lay there and waited for morning to overtake him, he realized that the seeds had been planted, and now he just had to see what grew from that poisonous field. And there you go. That's your Bright story for the week. Let me fix that. Yep, Candace is gonna get him. She's gonna make him wish he had never come back. And there you go. That is our Cashmere story for the week. We're really starting to build up some lore here. Let me put this one away where it's supposed to be. All right. Cool. Alrighty, let's move on to our Friday story, which is going to be a Dr. Winters story. We're going to be heading back to the under prison, so this is going to be a Dr. Winters Stragview story, I suppose. But Dr. Winters is going to meet with a couple of characters that we've seen before, a couple of characters that have been stuck in the under prison for a while. So I hope you guys remember them, and I hope you enjoyed the story. This one's called The Guard in the Under Prison. How long have you been in the under prison? The man was bedraggled, his clothes hanging off him like streamers, but he refused to leave the under prison until everyone else was taken and rehoused. He was an older man. He was an older man, mid-60s or maybe early 70s, and despite the fact that he was malnourished and appeared to be filthy, he was in fine spirits. Dr. Winters didn't think she had ever seen anyone in better spirits than this man. It was hard to explain, but he seemed to be radiating an aura of calmness that made her want to smile and believe that everything was going to be okay. Not long. 2 or 3 years, perhaps. Who can remember? In the under prison, time doesn't mean much. You're very well spoken. Most of the guys down here barely have the words anymore to tell me how they feel. The old man shook his head slowly, the ghost of a frown creasing his mouth. Poor things. They aren't used to living in the dark like this. Few are, but some of them have been here for decades. I talk to them, I soothe them, I make their time a little better. Is that why you refuse to leave? Yes. I will not leave until all of them are safe. It's my job, and I take it very seriously. Winters nodded. Winter nodded as she made notes on her chart. She had met him in here. She had met him. She had to meet him here in one of the under prison cells because otherwise, he said that not being here would cause the other prisoners extreme mental anguish. She didn't believe him at first. Inmates like to boast and brag, but after speaking with him for a little while, she believed he might actually be telling the truth. He didn't seem like your typical inmate either. There was something different about him, and she supposed. Can't talk today, guys. Sorry. She suspected that he might be one of the people that her brother had simply put here because he needed him. Why are you in the under prison? Because I was too good at my job. Did my brother place you here? I can't seem to find any information on you, but it's not as uncommon as you might think. I can't find a DC number, a court date, a sentence, or anything. I'm trying to decide if we'll be rehousing you here or if you'll be free to go, but I need information to make that assessment. Free to go. The old man seemed to taste it as he spoke the words, and he found that he liked them. I don't think I've ever felt free to go. I'm not sure I'd know what it was like. Have you been incarcerated most of your life? In one sense or another, I suppose I have. Sir, I need information, or I'm going to have to assume that you're an inmate and send you to E-dorm with all the others. If you're a free man, then I don't want to have to do that, but I won't have much of a choice. He shrugged, and the motion looked ghastly. I would honestly say that it's probably the best thing for the prison that I stay. I've been here for a very long time, and my presence keeps a certain amount of order here. It radiates out like a soothing wind. I'm sure you felt it in your brief time here. Hang on a second, guys. I'll be right back. Hang on a second. Okay, sorry about that. Let's get back to it. Where were we? I don't know. That's the one. Brief time here. All right. No, it was noise in the living room. Okay, let's start it back. I'm sure the warden would tell you the same. He would say that it would be a detriment to Stagview for me to leave, but that's only because he is selfish. His selfishness is the other reason that I'm here. I was free for a time, free to live my life as I chose, but he just couldn't handle that. I might know a little something about that, Dr. Winters said. I believe you might. I got the idea that the warden is some kin of yours, a cousin maybe, or a brother, I suspect. I think you are also kin to the other fellow who comes in. Maybe the three of you are siblings or some close relation. If you don't mind me saying so, you all even look a little bit alike. Dr. Winters wasn't sure if she was insulted or not, but decided to laugh and feel amused instead. Yeah. Well, I've never heard that one before. Most people say that no one looks like the warden. That's his glamour, the man said with all seriousness. He surrounds himself in oddness, but I can see beyond that a little. I think he wants to change, but he's afraid of what might happen if he changes too much. He'll never be good. He's not capable, but he is capable of being less cruel. Your brother is like a dragon in many ways. He is content to sleep for hundreds of years on top of his hoarded treasures, us in this case, but he is capable of awakening and causing great destruction when the mood takes him. Excuse me. Ooh. I like the Dr. Winters stories too, Leia. I can't believe that Winters is missing it. She's going to be upset. When the mood takes him. I think you may be a little like that as well. Sometimes, Dr. Winters said as she made notes, I think maybe all of us are like that a little bit. Not to his extent. The problem is that his span of contentment never lasts long. Inevitably, he must rise and destroy. It's in his nature, like the frog and the scorpion. The frog and the scorpion? Winter asked, not understanding. It's a very old story. I told it to your brother once, and he seemed to find it funny. A scorpion is waiting on the riverbank and trying to cross. A frog comes along, and the scorpion asks him if he can ride on his back across the river. The frog scoffs and tells him that he will poison him with his stinger, and he will die if he lets him climb on his back. The scorpion asks why he would do such a thing. He tells him that if he were to do this, then they would both drown and die. The frog thinks about this and decides that he will take the scorpion across the river. When he gets halfway across, the frog feels the sting press into him and turns to find that the scorpion has stung him. As the two sink into the river, the frog yells at the scorpion that now they will both die and asks him what the point of it was. The scorpion only shrugs as they sink below the water and tells the frog that he was right, that it was in his nature. Dr. Winters nodded as the man spoke, seeing the wisdom in the story. Her brother was a lot like that. He could be kind, even compassionate, where his family was concerned, but inevitably he would sting, and he would kill. He had to. It was in his nature. She supposed, when you came right down to it, it might be in her nature as well. Well, if you won't leave today, and you won't tell me anything about your situation, then why did you ask to see me? I wanted you to meet with someone specific, someone who is afraid to talk to you. Afraid to talk to me? She asked. Why would they be afraid to talk to me? I've done nothing to bring out such fear. The young man has been wronged. He's been here for some time, but he believes you might be in league with the warden. The warden put him here for no other reason than to shut him up, and despite my best efforts, he refuses to believe that talking to you will do anything but get him in more trouble. I'd like you to speak with him and convince him otherwise. Dr. Winters thought about this for a moment. She'd seen nearly everyone in the under prison, even if it was just briefly, and she couldn't remember anyone like the man this fellow was talking about. Maybe that was the point. If she hadn't seen him, then she supposed it would be their first meeting, and maybe if she believed... And maybe if he believed that she meant him harm, he had been avoiding her. If you take me to him, I'll be glad to talk. I'm certain... I'm certainly not here to do him any harm, and I would hope that he would see that we've been getting people out of here instead of keeping them down here. That's the thing. I think he believes those people are being killed once they get out of here. Dr. Winters stiffened. Why would he think that? You have to understand, this fellow has a lot of information on your brother. He's been collecting stories about him, and that's what got him in here. He'd been collecting first-hand accounts from inmates, ex-officers, and current officers, even some people on the outskirts of the prison. He feels that he knows what your brother is, and he feels that anyone who leaves the under-prison is probably dead. I've tried to convince him otherwise, tried to convince him that the people do get out, but he won't hear it. He says that if he stays down here, then he is safe, but if he lets one of you talk him into going topside, he's as good as dead. Hang on a second. I know, El Gusto. That's one of my favorite parables. Let's readjust this. All right. Dr. Winters told the man to lead the way, and they went to find this strangely paranoid fellow. Ever since the battle for Stragview, the under-prison had become more of an open-air dormitory. The cells had been thrown open, and most of the inmates just wandered around aimlessly. The really dangerous ones, or the ones who were a danger to themselves, had been processed out first, and now they were left with those who were mentally broken, or those who had been down here so long that they had turned a little funny. Some of them hadn't seen daylight in quite some time, and they hid towards the back of the under-prison so that the light coming in through the door wouldn't touch them. The fellow they went to see was one of them, a young-looking man with long, bedraggled hair and a strangely manic expression that made her think he might have been down here too long to be helped. He moved to the back of the cell when he saw her, making a strange moaning noise in the back of his throat. But when the calming inmate went over to talk to him, he spoke softly to him as the two conversed. Finally, after a few minutes of back and forth, the man looked at Dr. Winters and scrambled slowly towards her. He walked on his hands and the fronts of his feet, looking like an ape in some old movie. And when he spoke, she could tell that he wasn't used to doing it above much more than a whisper. "My name is Andrew Davis, and I'm here because I wrote a book about the Warden of Stragview. I would like to leave and go home. Someone may be looking for me. I'd like to let them know that I'm okay." Dr. Winters nodded and made notes. "Okay, Mr. Davis, what sort of book did you write about the Warden?" I told the truth," he insisted. "I never told lies. It was always what other people said. They sent me letters when they heard I was writing a story about the prison, and they told me their stories. They told me about all the weird stuff that happened around here, all the ghosts and monsters, and even about the most monstrous of them all, the Warden. Some of them were letters that were smuggled out by inmates. Some of them were letters that had been sent anonymously by guards. People are afraid of him. People who shouldn't be afraid of him are afraid of him. He's a bad man, and I'm afraid that he's never going to let me out of here. What's worse, I'm afraid that he is going to let me out of here, and that I'll go somewhere much worse. I'm afraid that he'll either kill me or that there's a worse prison waiting for me." "Mr. Davis, what is the crime that brought you here?" Have you been listening? There is no crime. He simply didn't like my book and decided to lock me in the under-prison, to shut me up. I never did anything. I just collected stories. I have to get out of here, but I'm terrified to get out of here. I need to be assured that he's not going to come after me, and that I'm not going to end up in a place like this again. I need to disappear, and it may be beneficial if I don't remember why I was here in the first place." Dr. Winters looked up from her notes. You're asking me to take your memories. I am. It seems like the only way I ever truly am going to be safe from the warden. He's never going to stop. Even if he says he will, he's never going to stop. If I'm going to disappear, then I have to forget most everything. That being said, if I give you a letter to send to somebody, would you mail it? More importantly, would you do it and not tell your brother? If you're sure this is what you want, Dr. Winters said, and when the man nodded, Dr. Winters reached out and put her hands on either side of his head. Are you ready? Do it. Do it before I lose my nerve. Dr. Winters cycled through his memories, seeing what had led him to this place. She saw the creation of his book, felt the fear when he knew the warden was closing in on him, and sensed the dread deep within him when he realized there was no escape. Then she felt the hidden desire for it all to end as he sat down here in the dark. He kept telling himself the stories again and again so he would never forget them. But after a while, it had been like a knife twisting in his guts. Nothing mattered anymore, and he simply wanted to rip off the Band-Aid and be done. It was brutal, and it was ultimately self-destructive, but he knew it was the only way that he could escape her brother. This man was not her. He was not even a match for the terrible interests of the warden. If he left, he would eventually start telling stories again, and then the warden would find him. She took them all and put them in one of the jars that she kept in her bag. It glowed a little as it sat there, and when the man slumped forward, she took him to the stairwell with the help of the bedraggled old man who had started all of this. The guards took him from her and helped him up the stairs. They would help him find clothes and figure out where he would go after he left the prison. But her part in all of this was over. What about you? She asked, as she turned back to the old man. The man smiled. I told you, whenever every inmate is out of this place, then I will go. Until then, I am the guard of the underprison, and I am the one who stays here for all of them. Dr. Winters left not long after that. She had never met someone who embodied selflessness like this man did. She hoped he knew what he was doing, and she hoped that one day he too would earn his freedom. The underprison would soon be empty. It would soon be just another hole where they used to keep people. But there was still work to do, and Dr. Winters would gladly do it for as long as it went on. And there you go. That's your Dr. Winters story today. Oh, thank you, El Gusto. The stream, I'm going to finish watching. Good horror movies are always a treat. Let's see. What else have we got here? Oh, yeah, we got to do our short stories for the week. Let's see. I've got a good one this week, I think. You guys are always about some long stories, so I've got a good long story this week. Let's start with this one. It's called His Last Performance, and it's about a concert pianist who wants to go out on a high note. No pun intended. So, let's hear about his last performance. The auditorium buzzed with interest as people in suits sat around like expectant insects. On the stage, there was a large, grand piano, and as the lights went down, I heard the unsteady footsteps of my grandfather's leather shoes. He had worn them for the better part of 60 years, And I'd asked him once why he took them to get them repaired instead of just getting a new pair. He had laughed and pointed at the dangling soles before telling me that when you had shoes that were this broken in and this comfortable, you didn't just throw 'em in the garbage can. It wasn't as if Gramps couldn't have afforded a new pair of shoes. Gramps had always lived pretty comfortably. He was a concert pianist. He had been since he was in high school, and he played the sort of music that made people cry and that made people come to the ballet or the opera to hear it. He did concerts as well, though not for people my age. It was for the stiff shirt crowd that usually showed up to things like that. He was well respected in his field, and the house was packed to the rafters for one reason and one reason only. Tonight was going to be his final performance, and people were expecting something amazing. Hang on a second. Excuse me, coming through. I looked up to see an older guy in an immaculate tuxedo coming down the aisle as he excused himself. He had the... Try that again. He had that artless way that some older men had about them, of looking charming and debonair without even trying. His cheekbones were high, and his hair was immaculate. I don't usually look at men that way, but even I had to admit. He was very handsome. He excused himself and sat in the seat beside me, a seat that my grandfather had reserved for someone he called... Excuse me. The patron. The old man took the seat and adjusted his tie, checking his watch as he listened to my grandfather's squeaky shoes walk towards the piano bench. This better be good. I've sunk a lot of time into this old fella. I wanted to tell him to button up and show a little respect, but Grandpa was having a seat in front of the piano and cracking his fingers before he began to play. For a man in his 80s, Grandpa played like he was in the prime of life. His fingers flew over the keys, his hands were nimble as they had ever been, and he would play anything that he set his mind to, with minimal practice. He was a genius, a prodigy, and I hoped that one day I would be even a third as good a pianist as he was. He ran through a few of his early works, a few songs written by great performers, and I heard the crowd making appreciative noises around me. I'm going to have to cover you guys up. You guys are very distracting. Grandpa never failed to captivate a crowd, but as the performance went on, I became aware of one person who was far from enthralled. The man who sat beside me was fidgeting, checking his watch and sighing as Grandpa played on. It was hard to ignore him from less than a foot away, and as he shifted his legs, I started getting agitated. Who was this old man? Who was he to talk so about my grandpa? Who was he to say that his nimble fingers and easy performances weren't the works of art that they had always been? I can't believe I came all the way here just to see this. The old man promised to move me, but I am far from moved. It's nothing I haven't heard before. The old man should damn well know it. Hey, I finally said, having had enough of it, why don't you pipe down? Grandpa's up there pouring his heart out. I can't believe that someone would sit here and say such things about him. The old man looked at me as if he had never been spoken to in such a way. As the smile began to creep across his face, "Oh, so Jamie Masterson is your grandfather, is he?" "He is, and you would do well to show him some respect. He's one of the greatest concert pianists of our age. If you aren't moved by his music, then that says more about you than it does about my grandfather." As Grandpa played on, the old man seemed more interested in me than the music going on ahead of us. "My apologies," the old man said. "It's just that I've heard it all before. I've been listening to your grandpa for a very, very long time. You could say that I'm the one who gave him his start." I rolled my eyes. "Well then, you'd have to be sure to publish your skincare routine, because you don't look a day over 45. I find it difficult to believe that you were already established over 60 years ago." "Son, I've been established a lot longer than that. Has your grandfather never spoken of me?" "If he did, then he must have spoken wrongly. My grandfather had never told me of someone so rude." "I was there when your grandfather played his first note of music. I was there when his fingers first touched the piano. I watched him play, and I was jealous. I too am a musician, but I could never play the way your grandfather did. Alas, my lot in life is to guide those to what they cannot find themselves. Your grandfather had talent, but he would have never survived in a world such as the one he lived in." Talent was not appreciated like it is now, and your grandfather needed a little help. I provided that help. I provided him with connections and confidence and helped him be the man he is today. I took it all in silence, deciding that the guy was a nut. I turned my attention to Grandpa, ignoring him as he rambled on. He talked about helping people and making deals, and I was about to tell him to be quiet when he said something that made me forget Grandpa's playing for a moment. "All it cost your grandfather is his soul, and I'd say he's got a pretty good deal for it." That got my attention. I turned my head back to the man, and as he grinned at me in the low light, I became aware of something just beneath the surface. Perhaps it was some monstrous aspect, or just a trick of the light, but his was a face that was used to being seen in low light. Are you claiming to be?" But he cut me off. "I'm not claiming to be anything. I am what I am. And I am the one who holds your grandfather's soul. I would say that bringing joy to people for the last 60 years is something that he would consider a fair trade, but his deal isn't quite over yet. Your grandfather wanted something at the end of his life, and I'm here to see if he can make good on it." I still didn't believe him. Who would believe him? But I was intrigued now, and as Grandpa's song began to come to an end, I asked him the question he clearly wanted me to voice. What is it that Grandpa wanted exactly? His smile was predatory, the kind of smile that told me he was hoping maybe the two of us could make a deal once Grandpa's concert was over. "Your grandfather agreed to trade me his soul for success and the proliferation of his talent. But he put in one stipulation. He told me that at the end of his life, he would play one song for me. He said he would write, compose, and play a song so beautiful that it would make an angel, even a fallen angel, weep for joy. He told me he would show me the face of God in a song, and that if I was brought to tears and moved by such a piece, I was to give him his soul back and proclaim him the greatest musician this world has ever known." I was speechless. I still didn't believe the man, but I found that I wanted to. My grandfather had always been so sharp, so renowned, and it wasn't hard to imagine that he had made a deal in his youth to gain such talent. This man was sitting here claiming to be that deal maker, and as the song ended and Grandpa basked in the applause, he slowly got to his feet and looked out over the audience. "Thank you for coming to my final concert. I have one more piece to play for you. It's something I've written for someone very special. He's here tonight. I want you all to thank my very mysterious benefactor and let him know exactly what you think of his song at the end of the concert. I hope he will find the time and energy he has invested in me to be an investment well made." "We shall see," the man beside me said, as the applause thundered around him. Grandpa took his seat behind the piano, and he began playing something halting and low. It grew in volume and majesty, soaring across the keys like a magnificent bird as it wafted around the auditorium. Grandpa's piece was strange, speeding up and slowing down and then speeding up again. It never rambled. It always challenged the note before it and found itself better. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, and I reached up to touch my face and found moisture running down my cheeks. I could see people crying before he had gotten very... Yeah. Before he had gotten very far, their faces were set in something rapturous, and they seemed unable to process what they were hearing fully. I saw people putting their hands to their faces, people's eyes getting wide enough that they might fall out of their heads, and even a few of them had risen to their feet so they could stand and watch him. I couldn't blame them. I felt like getting up as well. Some of them had already begun to clap, and others were joining them. They were clapping, a standing ovation that crashed over everything like a curled fist. If Grandpa heard them, then it never showed. He played on and on, as if only the music mattered to him. I saw sweat running down his face, his hair sticking up crazily, and he looked for all the world like a cartoon character, as his undershirt came untucked and stuck out like a... That's not the line. And stuck out with the fury of his playing. The whole song lasted 6 of the most glorious minutes of my life, but soon I found myself looking at the professed devil instead of at my grandfather as he played his heart out. The man's face had been a mask of contempt, a glamour of self-indulgence. But as the song went on, I saw that mask begin to crack. His mouth began to slip open, his eyes crinkling around the corners, and before the midpoint, his hands had risen to his face, and he was openly weeping. He didn't begin to clap, and he didn't have a rapturous experience, but he looked as if whatever he was hearing my grandfather play had moved him so deeply that he might never be the same again. When he cried, his tears were thick and red. It was as if he were crying blood, and it stained the front of his tuxedo like a toddler with pasta sauce. For just a moment, I saw the glamour break around him, and I beheld a face that very few had ever seen truly. It was not the face of Satan, but the face of Lucifer, the morning star, that shining being that once stood before God himself. In those moments, he was somehow reborn. He was transformed by my grandfather's song, and as it ended, and the applause continued to thunder around us, I saw the change go over him again, as he returned to nothing but an old man, sitting in the theater. They applauded for nearly 10 minutes. The thunderous waves crackled and exploded around us, and my grandfather rose as his song ended and began to bow for those who had come to hear him play his last. They loved him, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The man wiped the blood from his face, and I saw the stains on his tuxedo melt away to nothing as he, too, began to slowly clap his hands. Exquisite, he breathed, his voice the exclamation of an orgasm. Tell your grandfather that he has earned his soul back. Tell him that his song has done the impossible, and that it has done what I believed could never be done again. Tell him that I do not consider the time I spent on him wasted. Tell him that the magic was always in him, and that I only helped others to see it. He is truly the greatest composer of this and many other generations, and I was happy to be called his patron. Then he handed me something, a small leather book, and he took his leave as the applause continued. My grandfather hugged me after the concert was over and asked if the old man had said anything to me. He had made a beeline for me straight away, diverting several well-wishers and benefactors of the arts who had come to speak with him to get to my side. He was smiling, but you could see the concern in his eyes as he asked if the old devil had said anything. I said nothing. I just handed him the book, but his face told me all I needed to know. He lived to be 100, living another 20 years after his final concert, before dying peacefully in his bed one night. He never played again. He never even touched a piano after that night. And people still talk about that concert in my hometown to this very day. My grandfather was a legend for so many reasons, but I think I might be the only one besides him who knows the truth behind it. He made a deal with the devil and then fulfilled his bargain so fully that the devil was forced to give him back what he had taken. Few have ever done such, few that I know of, but Grandpa truly was a master of his craft. And there you go. All right, let's see what I missed. Hey, Kathleen, good to see you. Uh-oh. Oof, goodness. And there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now that we're all caught up, I got one more story, and it's some of that good emotional horror that I know you guys like so much. This one's got a weird premise. I had thought of it before I went to bed one night, and I think you guys will like it. Like I said, it's that good emotional gut horror that you guys seem to always like. This one's called If You Knock on It, It Becomes a Door, and it's going to take us out for the evening. So, I hope you guys enjoy it. Her name was Janice, and I'll never forget her. We met one night at this dive bar that I used to frequent. Dusty's was barely even stable enough to be called a bar, but the drinks were cheap and the music was pretty good, and it was in the right part of town for a broke college kid like me to get a few beers in after class. They had a pretty shaky ID policy, and the bartender never looked twice at my clearly doctored ID. I wouldn't be 21 for another year when I started drinking there, and he didn't seem to mind. I got the feeling that if it wasn't for drunk college kids with fake IDs, the bar probably wouldn't be able to stay open. So the owner hid under the plausible deniability of our poorly constructed glamour. I had been drinking for about the last 6 months when I saw her. Most of Dusty's crowd was college kids with ramen stains on their shirts, winos from the alley behind the bar, and the odd junkie or guy looking to sell a bag of something to somebody else. We didn't get a lot of fights there, but it was definitely not the pinnacle of Western civilization. She stood out like a neon tube in a school fluorescent. She was wearing a purple sequin jacket with something a lighter shade of purple underneath it. She had on what could have been charitably called a skirt, but it was probably more similar to a tutu. She had on socks that went up to her knees, and a pair of Doc Martens that looked like they'd kick your teeth in if you made her mad. She was sitting at the bar, and she was smoking a cigarette, and as I came in, I watched the ash fall under her glass and slowly drowned into her glass. Under. Oh, thank you, Blondie. I appreciate that. That'll definitely help feed the grand chickens there. As I came in, I watched the ash fall into her glass and slowly drowned. She didn't seem to care. She finished the drink and then started patting her pockets for another cigarette. Before she could find her smokes, I reached into my own pocket and fished out a pack of Marlboro Reds and offered her one. She looked at the pack and grinned before reaching out to take one, and began the shakedown dance again so she could find a lighter. Her face illuminated oddly when I brought out my own lighter, and she smiled as she leaned towards the flame. A gentleman, and a gentleman who's prepared as well. My name is Janus. What's yours? I told her my name was Bert, and we spent the rest of the night talking. I usually only stayed in Dusty's until I was drunk enough to stumble back to my dorm room and pass out, but when the old man called last call around 3 a.m., I realized I'd been there for several hours. I didn't mind. I'd been having fun talking to her. As we kept drinking, the subject matter became a little hazy, but that was okay too. It was all right. Everything was all right, and her sparkly jacket seemed to glimmer under the harsh fluorescence of the bar as the alcohol made halos around the rhinestones. Looks like this wound's about to close, she said with a laugh as she put her glass down and tossed some money on the bar. You heading out, or are you feeling like maybe drinking a little more? Thanks, Leia. I really appreciate that. Yes, they have. Baba's up to about 7 chicks that are following her around right now, and I think Aylin's still got 2. So it's been a busy hatching year this year. I don't get a lot of play from women. My body type is similar to that of a potato, but I knew a come on when I heard one. I told her I'd be glad to do a little more drinking, and she took me by the hand and led me towards the back of the bar where the bathrooms were. I was hesitant, not wanting to get banned from Dusty's for getting up to a little hanky-panky in a bathroom stall, but when I tried to pull away, her grip became firm, and she told me to trust her. I didn't really see many options as we came to the door of the women's room. She looked around conspiratorially, and then turned back to me. Do you know something cool about the universe, Bert? I shook my head slowly. It's something I discovered when I was very young. Something that's taken me places all my life. I don't know if it's like this for you, she said as she reached back and rapped her knuckles 3 times on the door. But for me, the one cosmic truth has always been this. If you knock on it, it becomes a door. I laughed. I thought she was drunker than I was, but then my laugh became a gasp as she opened the door, and I saw a sea of glowing tubes and heard music that wouldn't be popular for another 10 years at this point. I saw smoke and heard a beat that seemed to move through my bones. People had turned to look at the disturbance, and Then she pulled me through the door and let it close behind her. Suddenly, we were in a strange place that was so alien, it might as well be on another planet. That was the first time I stepped through one of those doors, but it wouldn't be the last. I would come to discover that she had taken me to what was called a rave. There was a man on a podium with a computer that was much smaller than the one I had back in my dorm room. It was pumping out music that I could feel in my fillings, and the people on the floor were dancing in a way that made me think they might be on drugs. She pushed through them and went to the bar, Janus getting me something to drink as I took it all in. I met Janus in 1992, and at that point, this was just about the weirdest thing I had ever seen. "How do you like it?" she asked, having to shout over the music. "I don't know," I said with a little shrug. "It's just..." I did it wrong. Damn. How do you like it? Let's see. We've got Bert, Ernie. Turns out, the black chicken in the tank is a rooster, so we're calling him Chickless Cage. Chanticleer is out there with Aelin, and I think there might be another one under Baba, but we're not sure. Oh yeah, absolutely, Eld. You should. Alright, let's get back to the story. "How do you do that?" I asked, having to shout over the music. "I don't know," she said with a little shrug. "It's just something I've always been able to do." Oof. For my whole life, anytime I needed to go somewhere, I would just knock and it would take me somewhere else. I don't know if I'm a time traveler or it's just another dimension. I don't even know if we're on the same planet or not, but I know it's fun, and I'll probably keep doing it till I die. We danced a little, or did what amounted to dancing in this place, but after a while, we went off somewhere quieter and started talking. Janus told me that she had been traveling like this since she was about 6 years old. She might have been traveling longer than that. She couldn't remember, but 6 years old was when she had started time traveling for real. My wife basically, like, checks them when they're, like, chicks, and I guess she knows what she's looking for. But, I don't know, she's gotten pretty good at it. She's got, like, a 90% success rate at it so far. My parents had sent me to bed without supper because of something I had said to a teacher. I told my teacher that blue whales were not the biggest animal in the ocean, and she laughed at me and told me I was wrong. She stopped laughing when I told her that she was wrong, like she knew what was in the ocean. Anyway, so my parents sent me to bed without supper, and I decided that if they were going... If they weren't going to feed me, then I would feed myself. Where were we? So I knocked on my closet door and went into this strange back alley place so that I could try to find some food. I didn't have any control over where the doors open. That's one of the major problems with knocking. I could travel, but I never know where it's going to bring me out. Back then, I just explored wherever it took me, thinking that nothing would hurt me in that way that children always do. It was an adventure, and I would come out on the other side in the same shape that I always had, just like the kids in the fantasy stories that I read. It didn't happen like that this time. Some people got a hold of me and tried to sell me to some other people as slave labor or something. Apparently, I'd come out in some sort of Dickensian version of the United States, and I was just some orphan girl in weird clothes. It took me a while, but I managed to get away from them and started knocking on doors as I tried to get back. Sometimes, if I knocked on the same door or near the place that I had come out through, I could go back to the place that I had come from. It took me some time to get back to that exact alley, but when I knocked on the wall, it turned into a door, and I stepped out through my closet. She took a long drag off her cigarette as she let the music in the warehouse behind us thump through her body, clearly trying to find the words for what came next. The problem is, time works different on that side of things. I hadn't been gone for a couple of days or a week or two, like I had over there. I'd been missing for 2 years. I came back to discover that the room that had once been mine wasn't mine anymore. Nobody lived in my house, and everything was dark and cold. Some of my clothes were still there, and I put them in a backpack and started exploring what was left. My parents were gone. Whether they'd moved or died or whatever, I didn't know. There was nobody there to greet me, and the house was abandoned, so I decided to knock on another door and move again. After that, I just kept moving, just kept knocking, just kept living. I stole things when I needed to, I worked when I needed to, and mostly I just kept traveling. I don't even know if the version of my parents' house that I came out on was mine or not, but I didn't care. I'd seen things in my time in that city that had made me very afraid, and I knew now that what I saw on the other side of the doors could hurt me. I didn't want to be hurt anymore, so I just kept moving. That's a rough way to live, especially for a little kid, I said lamely, as I watched my own cigarette burn down in my hand. I wasn't even smoking it anymore. The conversation had stolen my attendance, and when it fell to the ground, I didn't even pick it up. Yeah, I guess so. It was just life for me. I've been traveling ever since, seeing everything and doing whatever. It's lonely out there sometimes. I take people with me on occasions, and eventually I drop them off somewhere else, and they go about their own sort of lives. Nobody stays for long. Most people don't want to travel aimlessly forever, but it's all I've ever known. We stood in silence for a moment, me trying to find something to say, and her clearly weighing her next words. Oh yeah, El, beekeeping's the next thing I'm going to get into. It's pretty affordable. Like if you've got like just $500 to drop on bee supplies, it's pretty affordable. And I mean, bees aren't super hard to keep alive. All you really have to do is keep them warm in the winter and put out food for them, like sugar water, basically. I like you, Bert. You seem like a fun guy. Would you like to travel with me for a while? I can't promise that it'll always be comfortable, but it will be interesting. You look like you could use a little interesting in your life. I started to say yes. Absolutely no hesitation, but my better judgment got the better of me. My life wasn't perfect. I was swimming in college debt, and my classes were slowly circling the drain. But I only had about 6 months of my degree left before I might be able to have something worthwhile. That something worthwhile was probably just a job that would help me pay off my student loans, but it was something. I couldn't just up and abandon everything. My dad had died when I was in high school, but my mom had been trying her best to help me when she could. She would be distraught if I just suddenly vanished, and I couldn't do that to her. Tell you what, you keep coming back to Dusty's, and I'll keep showing up for adventures. Is that an option? She laughed, and then she leaned in to kiss me, and her mouth tasted like cigarettes and a strange miasma of alcohols. Tasted like something else, too, however. It tasted foreign, like she'd eaten meals that I didn't have names for, like she drunk water from streams in places that I had never seen and would never see, and something else below the surface that I couldn't place at the time. Janus tasted like freedom. Tell you what, I'll keep hanging around Dusty's for a couple of months. If you change your mind and you want to come with me when I decide to tumbleweed out of here, I'll take you with me. Fair warning, if you stop seeing me for a while, then it probably means I've moved on. I don't stay in any place more than a couple of months, and that's just the way I like it. She took me back to the spot we'd come out of, and when we stepped back through, I saw the bartender look up and shake his head at me. "What are you, some kind of magician? I swear I just checked that bathroom." "Well, you're pretty lucky. I was just about to close up and go home. Get out of here. I'm sure I'll see you back tonight." I turned around, but Janus didn't come with me. The door had just become a regular bathroom door again, and I walked back to my dorm room with my head buzzing. I'd seen more in that night than I'd seen in my 3 years of college, and I found that I wanted to see more. I'd never even been out of my hometown, and as I settled in for bed, I thought that a little traveling might be the best thing for me. It would need to come after, though. I needed to be done with this part of my life first, and then we could see what would come after. I didn't see Janus at Dusty's every night, but I saw her there regularly. We didn't wait till last call after the first night. She would take me by the hand and lead me to a door, sometimes through the bathroom and sometimes through the door at the back of the room, and then she would take me to these wonderful and sometimes terrifying places. Sometimes we would go to parties, and sometimes we would just explore fantastical places, but our trips were never boring. We danced beneath 4 moons in a forest that looked as alien as the bottom of an ocean must. We drank unnamed cocktails in a monochrome bar full of slug people. We skied down snow as pristine as porcelain on a planet that never got below 80 degrees. We danced to music that you didn't hear with your ears, but you felt in every other sense in your body. We also hid from creatures made entirely of shadow, were hunted through the woods by strange, deformed canines, got yelled at by creatures whose language was completely unintelligible, and stood in a room full of mirror versions of ourselves who were slightly different or slightly worse. In those 6 months, I saw more things than I could describe, did more things than I could ever even begin to talk about, and felt free for the first time in a long time. Something else happened that I hadn't expected either. Janus and I started to grow closer. It started with her grabbing my hand and holding my fingers tight, but eventually it became something else. It was an arm thrown over my shoulder. It was her head against my chest as we danced. It was her lips on mine under the stars. It was her eyes when she would look at me as we stood together. Sometimes she would throw herself at me without warning, and for a guy who had been in the middle of a 2-year dry spell, I suddenly had a rather active sex life. I don't know when I decided that I loved her, but I believe she felt the same. It was so obvious that she had feelings for me as well, but I suppose it was only obvious to me. Something else happened that I hadn't expected. Somehow, as I traveled to strange places and saw wondrous things, I found my grades increasing and my desire to finish school refreshed. I seemed to have a new lease on life, and suddenly I wasn't content to get drunk and stumble home and fall into unconsciousness. I wanted more than my single existence, and I decided that I didn't want to simply be dropped somewhere when she grew tired of me. I wanted to see it all, and more than that, I wanted to see it all with her. Ugh. After a few months, it was time to graduate and see all my efforts rewarded. I invited Janice to my graduation. She laughed at me and said that of course she'd be there. My mom would be there, so would my siblings, and they looked at the strangely dressed woman as she waved and screamed my name from the bleachers. She hugged me and stood for photos as I stood in my cap and gown, and afterwards she took me out to celebrate. She took me to a cliffside that overlooked an oddly purple ocean as it lapped against the rocks behind us. She had set up a sort of picnic, and as she pulled it out of her bag and laid it on the ground, she patted a pillow and invited me to come sit with her. Ugh. I had a little more than celebrating on my mind that night. I was going to ask... I was going to ask Janice to stay with me. I was going to offer to go with her, to travel with her, and I'd already asked Mom if I could have the ring that Dad had given her. I know how stupid that sounds. 6 months is absolutely no time to have known someone. But when I was with Janice, everything felt right. We drank and ate and talked about life and discussed what we would do next. And that's when I approached the subject. I think I'm ready to go with you. Janice squealed and threw her arms around me, spilling champagne down my back as she did so. Oh my gosh, yes! I'm so happy to hear that, Bert. You won't regret it. We're gonna have a blast. There's something I want to ask you before we go, though. Something I want to know. She laughed and looked at me as if she thought I was going to ask her what I needed to pack or if I was ever going to come back. When I pulled the ring out, it seemed to be the last thing that she had expected. I don't want to be your temporary companion, Janice. I want to be with you forever. I want to travel forever with you. Will you marry me? I'd expected joy or tears or astonishment, but I wasn't prepared when she began to back away from me. She looked confused, like she couldn't understand what I was asking. Her hands were still by her mouth, but she looked unsure instead of speechless. When I reached out for her, wanting to comfort her through whatever this was, she pulled away from me and shook her head. Janice, what's wrong? I'm ready to go with you. I want to travel with you. Forever. The tears were really coming down now, and as she reached out for the ring, her hands shook. Bert, I want to say yes, but I'm just not sure. She struggled with words and finally came up with, I care for you very deeply, but everyone I get close to ultimately leaves. She closed her eyes and shook her head slowly as she tried to make sense of it. I need to think about this. Can I think about it? Can I give you an answer tomorrow night? I nodded, not having much else to do, and as she took me back to the bar and left me at the door to the storage room, her kiss felt heated and uncertain. Worse, it felt conflicted, and as I walked home, I hoped I would see her tomorrow. Whether the answer was yes or no, I just wanted to see her again. I came back the next day, but Janice was nowhere to be found. I came back the next night, but she was still nowhere to be seen. I came back every night for 2 weeks. I came back until college left a notice that it was time to vacate my dorm room. But I never saw Janice again. I drove from my house to the bar a few times, but she was never there. Ooh, flubbed that one. I found myself feeling lost after that. I just drifted for a while. Nothing really mattering beyond. But my mind was never far from Janus. I didn't know if she had rejected my proposal or if something had happened to her, but after 3 months of wondering, I made a decision that would change my life. I took the money my family had given me after graduation. I closed out my bank account. I packed some clothes in a backpack, and I just left. I headed out into the world with no plans, no destination, and only one idea in my head. I would look for her until I found her, or until the day I die. That was years ago. I've been out of college for decades, but I still find myself visiting bars and looking for Janus. I sit in the back and scan the crowd. Sometimes I drink, sometimes I don't. But when it's closing time, I always move on. In my own way, I'm traveling, just like her. I've made my way to the West Coast twice now, and when I do, I turn around and walk back. When I need money, I do day labor or handyman work. When I'm tired, I find somewhere out of the way to sleep. When I find myself willing to take a ride, when I find someone willing to give me a ride, I take it. When I find a bar, I stop and stay until last call. I'm older now, no longer the bright-eyed kid I was for the 8 months that we knew each other. She probably wouldn't even recognize me anymore. I don't care. I don't care if she rejects me. I don't care if she hates me. I just want to see her one more time and ask her why she never came back. If I die before I see her again, then maybe I'll get my answers sooner rather than later. Until then, I'll keep traveling. I'll keep looking. I'll keep seeking the doors. And there you go. That's your last story of the night. Let me change that up a little bit. Oh, and that's going to take us out tonight, guys. I do hope you guys enjoyed the story, and I do hope you guys enjoyed our live stream tonight. Hopefully we'll see you guys again very soon for more cool stories and more cool times. Till then, this is Dr. Plague, heading off to dinner, and wishing you guys a lovely evening. We'll catch you next Wednesday. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow night. I've got something kind of special, kind of unique. I hope you guys enjoy it. I worked real hard on it. And we'll catch you guys next time. Dr. Plague, signing off. You guys have a good one. Take care.